Did Queen Camilla really call Princess Charlotte a mini Meghan and get herself thrown out by Prince William? What began as a private family disagreement has exploded into royal chaos, with Queen Camilla allegedly making a shocking, racially charged remark about young Princess Charlotte that insiders say crossed a line Prince William will never forgive. According to royal staffers, Camilla compared Charlotte's independence to Meghan Markle in a sneering tone, even saying she's already showing that Markle attitude. Now, the future king isn't just furious, he's taking drastic action. From Camilla's whispered insult to the moment William ordered her out, this is a scandal Buckingham Palace is scrambling to contain. Stay with us. What we've uncovered will leave you stunned. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. It started with whispers in the halls of Windsor Castle. A quiet exchange, a passing comment that should have stayed behind closed doors, but didn't. Now, those whispers have erupted into a full-blown royal firestorm. At the center, a grandmother's careless remark, a father's unrelenting fury, and a young girl unknowingly caught in the middle of a legacy far larger than herself. This isn't the fairy tale version of royal life you're used to hearing. This isn't about tiaras, palace balls, or perfect Christmas portraits on the palace lawn. This is about betrayal, about pride, about bloodline, power, and the invisible lines that divide us from them in a family that constantly projects unity while privately brimming with conflict. Welcome to the truth behind the latest drama in the House of Windsor, a drama that, according to insiders, could lead to one of the most seismic shifts in royal dynamics since the abdication of King Edward VIII. Prince William, the future King of England, has reportedly made a decision that stunned even the most seasoned royal observers. According to high-level leaks, he has ordered Queen Camilla, the wife of his father King Charles III, out of his immediate family's orbit after a private family disagreement escalated into something far more personal and far more disturbing. The spark? A comment allegedly made by Camilla, not about a political issue or palace operations, but about William's only daughter, Princess Charlotte. What could possibly drive Prince William to draw such a dramatic and public line in the sand? Why would he, a man often regarded as diplomatic and reserved, risk reigniting a decades-long powder keg of royal tension over a comment? And what exactly did Camilla say that was so offensive, so deeply inappropriate, that it reportedly led William to bar her from family events involving his children? It all boils down to a single, sharp, and racially charged remark that has opened old wounds and thrust the monarchy back under the unforgiving lens of public scrutiny. Camilla, according to those present, allegedly compared Princess Charlotte, just 9 years old, to Meghan Markle, the estranged Duchess of Sussex, in a way that left no doubt about the insult's intention. She's a mini Meghan, Camilla reportedly said, after a minor disagreement within the family. She's already showing that Markle attitude. This wasn't just a throwaway insult. It wasn't just a poorly chosen metaphor. It was a statement soaked in subtext, dripping with the very prejudice and judgment that Meghan herself has spoken about so openly in the past. It's a comment that echoes with all the weight of royal history, steeped in centuries of expectation, class distinction, and quiet racial undertones. And it didn't go unnoticed. In fact, Prince William's reaction was immediate and furious. According to multiple sources close to the family, William was incandescent when he learned of the comment. Not because he's particularly protective of Meghan, relations between them have been icy, to say the least, but because the target this time wasn't his sister-in-law. It was his daughter. Princess Charlotte, known to the public as a bright and lively child, has always carried herself with a balance of independence and royal poise that many find remarkable for her age. She's a favorite among royal watchers, often stealing the spotlight with a cheeky smile or a gentle wave. But behind that public persona is a little girl navigating the immense pressure of growing up royal. And for William, who has long tried to shield his children from the darkest corners of palace life, Camilla's comment represented an unacceptable crossing of the line. To understand just how deeply this insult cut, we need to step back and look at the dynamics within the royal family, both public and private. Camilla has never been fully embraced by William and Harry. Though she's now queen consort and Charles's devoted wife, she remains a divisive figure. The memory of their mother, Princess Diana, still casts a long shadow over their relationships, especially with William, who has always kept Camilla at arm's length. In public, they smile. They stand beside each other at events. They nod in respect. But behind palace doors, it's a different story. William's respect for Camilla, if it exists at all, has always been tightly measured. And now, with this latest incident, whatever diplomatic détente may have existed between them appears to have shattered entirely. According to palace insiders, William didn't just express disappointment in Camilla. He issued a firm, unambiguous instruction. She is no longer welcome at family gatherings where his children are present. That includes birthdays, holidays, and even casual Sunday lunches. The message was clear: cross this line, and you're out. This isn't the first time the royal family has found itself in the middle of a racial controversy. Meghan Markle's explosive interview with Oprah Winfrey in 2021 reignited a global conversation about race, privilege, and the British monarchy. In that interview, Meghan spoke of unnamed family members expressing concerns about how dark her unborn child's skin might be. While the palace swiftly denied any wrongdoing, the damage was done. A fracture had formed, one that still hasn't healed. Camilla's latest comment, if confirmed, risks pulling the monarchy back into that firestorm. And this time, the damage may be even harder to contain. Because unlike the Meghan saga, this situation involves a direct heir to the throne, his daughter, and a queen consort who was only just beginning to cement her place in the public's good graces. The queen herself, Elizabeth II, often preached the value of never complain, never explain. It was a motto designed to keep the monarchy above the fray of public debate. But that era is gone. In today's hyper-connected world, silence is no longer interpreted as dignity, it's seen as complicity. And William, more than any other royal, seems to understand that. He knows the power of perception. He knows how fast stories can spread, how quickly narratives form, and how damaging even a single misstep can be. That's why his reaction was so immediate, so uncompromising. For William, this isn't just about Charlotte. It's about the future of the monarchy, about setting a new standard, about sending a message not just to Camilla, but to the entire royal establishment that his children are off limits, that the next generation of Windsors will not grow up under the same cloud of quiet prejudice and palace politics that plagued his own childhood. What makes this moment even more explosive is how it exposes the internal fractures that the palace has desperately tried to hide. For years, royal watchers have speculated about the true state of affairs behind those palace walls. Now, with this one comment, the facade has cracked, and what's peeking through is a picture of a family still struggling to come to terms with its own legacy, still wrestling with the ghosts of Diana, the fallout of Meghan, and the looming reality of a modern, multicultural Britain that's watching every move. The stakes are higher than ever. Because this isn't just about family drama. It's about the very survival of the monarchy in the 21st century. If the royal family is to remain relevant, it must reflect the values of the nation it represents. It must rise above old prejudices. It must protect its most vulnerable members, not just physically, but emotionally. And yet, as the dust continues to settle, the question remains, how deep does this rift go? Can Prince William and Queen Camilla ever repair their relationship after such a personal betrayal? Will King Charles be forced to choose between his wife and his son? And what does this mean for the monarchy's already fragile reputation? Only time will tell. But one thing is clear, the line has been drawn. And Prince William, the once reserved heir, has shown he's not afraid to defend his family, not just from the outside world, but from within his own royal circle. Let's now take a deeper look at how this conflict unfolded, what led up to it, what Camilla's exact words were, how the rest of the family responded, and how this singular moment might change the monarchy forever. Tensions inside the royal family didn't begin with Camilla's remark about Princess Charlotte, but that moment acted as the final spark in a slow-burning fire. Behind the palatial walls of Kensington, Clarence House, and Sandringham, the monarchy is built upon a delicate network of relationships maintained through discretion, duty, and, sometimes, silence. But cracks in those bonds have been forming for years, and the events leading to the latest fallout reveal just how deep those fractures run. According to individuals familiar with the day-to-day rhythms of palace life, Camilla's relationship with Prince William has always been cold at best. From the moment she officially entered the royal fold after marrying King Charles in 2005, Camilla was a polarizing figure. Though public sentiment gradually warmed toward her over time, privately, she was never truly accepted by Diana's sons. William, in particular, remained distant, polite in public, yet guarded in private. Sources close to royal aides confirmed that William's unease around Camilla stemmed less from jealousy and more from loyalty. For William, his mother's memory has always been sacred. He remembers the years of heartbreak, the late-night phone calls, the interviews where Diana spoke candidly about being isolated and betrayed. He remembers how she cried, how she struggled to raise him and Harry with strength and compassion despite the glaring scrutiny of the media and the indifference of the royal institution. So, when Camilla was introduced into the family narrative, not as Charles's former mistress, but as a future queen, the emotional stakes skyrocketed. Privately, William was said to have tolerated Camilla rather than accepted her. They performed joint engagements. They stood beside each other at Trooping the Color. But there was always a subtle distance, a visible lack of warmth that eagle-eyed observers could detect in photos and fleeting interactions. Royal insiders have long speculated that William and Camilla's interactions were strictly formal, with William keeping her on the periphery of his inner circle. So when the alleged insult involving Princess Charlotte was made, it was not simply a tasteless comment. It was a culmination of years of unresolved tension. The incident reportedly occurred during a quiet afternoon at Balmoral Castle in Scotland, where members of the royal family had gathered for a late summer visit. It was meant to be a time of rest, of private bonding. William had brought his children, George, Charlotte, and Louis, to spend quality time with their grandfather, King Charles. Camilla was also present, as she often is these days, accompanying the king and mingling with the family. Accounts of what happened that day vary slightly in detail but align in tone. Charlotte, known for her spirited personality, had reportedly challenged a small rule or tradition, perhaps something as trivial as refusing a particular food or expressing herself in a moment of mild frustration. It was the kind of behavior any child her age might display. But according to two sources familiar with the conversation, Camilla observed the moment, leaned over to an aide, and muttered words that would ignite a chain reaction. "She's got that Meghan spark, doesn't she? That stubborn little streak. You can tell she's got the Markle attitude already." The comment, casual in delivery, was reportedly overheard by more than one person. One of those individuals, stunned by the remark, discreetly passed it on to William later that evening. The reaction, as described by one palace staffer, was immediate and explosive. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't shout. But you could feel the room change, the staffer recalled. It was like the temperature dropped. He asked once she said that. And when the person confirmed it, William simply got up and left the room. He didn't speak to Camilla again for the rest of the visit. In the hours that followed, William confronted Camilla in private. No press statements were made. No royal communications teams were involved. This was personal father to stepmother, prince to queen. The confrontation, while behind closed doors, left ripples throughout the castle. Staff described a tense atmosphere, with several aides reportedly reassigned from William's wing of the castle to avoid further incidents. What followed was even more telling. William made a firm decision. Camilla would no longer be permitted to interact with his children outside formal, state-sanctioned events. That meant no private lunches, no shared holiday visits, no informal family gatherings where she could play the role of step-grandmother. This wasn't a passive retreat, it was an active freeze-out. The implications of such a move are profound. In royal life, where perception is everything and internal disputes are rarely acknowledged publicly, such a declaration would be considered almost revolutionary. It sends a clear message, not just to Camilla, but to the entire family. Prince William is drawing new lines about who is welcome in his personal sphere. And he is doing so not just as a father, but as a future monarch. King Charles was reportedly devastated by the development. Though he did not witness the comment firsthand, aides confirmed that he was informed shortly after the confrontation. Charles, ever the mediator, is said to have attempted to smooth things over, encouraging William to reconsider. But William, according to those familiar with the exchange, stood firm. There was nothing to reconsider, said a family confidant. This wasn't about protocol. This was about respect. About a child who did nothing wrong being dragged into old resentments and prejudices. As the fallout unfolded, the rest of the royal family watched in silence. Princess Kate, known for her diplomatic poise, reportedly supported her husband's decision wholeheartedly. She, too, has worked tirelessly to create a stable environment for their children, shielding them from the darker shadows of royal life. And like William, she views Charlotte as her own legacy, one that must be fiercely protected. But it wasn't just Camilla who faced the consequences of her words. The incident triggered deeper discussions within the family about race, bias, and generational change. While no official meetings were scheduled, insiders claim that several royal advisors began reassessing the palace's internal policies around inclusion and diversity. Once again, the ghosts of the Meghan controversy had returned, and this time, they couldn't be ignored. For Camilla, the backlash has been more isolating than anticipated. Though publicly she remains composed, sources say she has been privately rattled by William's swift and unwavering response. What she may have intended as a passing remark was instead interpreted as a deeply offensive jab at a child and at a family line that is gradually redefining what it means to be royal in a changing world. As this rift continues to widen, attention has turned toward the long-term impact on the monarchy itself. William, in asserting such a strong personal boundary, is also signaling how he intends to lead one day. He is not merely reacting emotionally. He is making a statement about values, integrity, and the kind of king he intends to be. And the public is watching. The British monarchy has long thrived on an image of unity and tradition, but that image has taken repeated hits in recent years. The death of Queen Elizabeth left a vacuum of moral authority. Meghan and Harry's departure sent shockwaves through the institution. Now, this newest fracture between the heir and the Queen consort raises uncomfortable questions about who is truly fit to represent modern Britain and how much longer the old guard can hold on. Observers say that William's stance, while bold, may actually strengthen his public support in the long run. In a society increasingly aware of issues of race, identity, and generational transition, many view his defense of Charlotte as not just a fatherly instinct, but a necessary stand. He is, in effect, separating the future from the past, drawing a new blueprint for the next era of the monarchy. But as the dust settles, another question lingers. What happens now? Can Camilla find a path to redemption in William's eyes? Can King Charles navigate this family civil war without alienating either his wife or his son? And can the monarchy, already strained by years of internal chaos, survive yet another fracture at its highest levels? Those questions hang heavy over Buckingham Palace. And as the royal family enters a new chapter, marked not by silent acceptance, but by open confrontation, the world waits to see whether it will fracture further or finally begin to heal. The moment news broke inside the palace that Prince William had formally drawn a line, effectively banning Queen Camilla from engaging with his children in any informal setting, the shockwave that followed was swift and unmistakable. The royal court, usually a place of calculated calm and measured responses, found itself reeling under the weight of an unprecedented familial rupture. Queen Camilla, long accustomed to walking the tightrope of royal acceptance, was blindsided. According to senior palace staff, she received the news not through a direct conversation with William himself, but via King Charles. He had taken it upon himself to relay his son's decision during a private meeting over breakfast at Clarence House. Those present described Camilla's reaction as initially subdued. She appeared confused, almost disbelieving, as if she had misheard what was being said. "He's doing what?" she reportedly asked Charles, setting down her cup of tea. When Charles repeated William's decision that Camilla was no longer to have personal interactions with George, Charlotte, or Louis outside formal royal engagements, she reportedly sat in stunned silence for several minutes. Then came a sharp change in demeanor. Staff said her composure gave way to a wave of fury. The Queen consort, typically diplomatic and reserved in her public dealings, was, in this private moment, incandescent. "How dare he decide something like that without speaking to me?" she was heard saying. "They are my family too." To Camilla, this was not simply about access to her step-grandchildren. It was about status, identity, and legitimacy. After decades spent navigating scorn, skepticism, and press attacks, she had finally emerged into the light of royal approval. Queen consort was not just a title, it was validation. And now, in one devastating move, her place within the family was being openly questioned. Palace insiders say Camilla immediately demanded an audience with William, hoping to clarify or perhaps confront. But William, already in Windsor that morning, reportedly declined the invitation. He did not want a dialogue. His decision, communicated through formal intermediaries, was final. In the days that followed, Camilla's anger evolved into something far more complex, a sense of betrayal. Despite her long-standing efforts to maintain civility with William and Kate, despite the appearances of harmony at public events, it became increasingly clear to her that the bond had been superficial at best. She thought they had moved on, said a long time made familiar with Camilla's thinking. She believed that after all the years of effort, the public smiles, the shared engagements, she had at least earned a level of respect. But William's actions told her otherwise. He still saw her as the outsider. And worse, he was willing to let the world know it. Indeed, as the royal press machine began subtly briefing journalists on the situation, the language used in off-the-record conversations was telling. Phrases like protective father, firm boundary, and non-negotiable position began surfacing in news articles. The palace didn't issue any formal statements, but the narrative was being shaped with precision. William was not acting out of petty grievance. He was acting out of moral obligation. The subtext was clear. Camilla had crossed a line, and the heir to the throne was defending his children. Camilla, however, was not prepared to simply absorb the blow. While she could not respond publicly, royal protocol forbids emotional outbursts or personal rebuttals. She began wielding influence behind the scenes. Long respected for her network of loyal journalists and discreet allies within the establishment, Camilla reportedly reached out to sympathetic members of the British media. Not to launch a counterattack, but to subtly shift the narrative. Articles began appearing in select publications painting Camilla as a misunderstood figure. They highlighted her dedication to charitable work, her gentle humor, her role in modernizing the monarchy. Some even questioned whether William's decision was overly reactionary, whether it reflected personal bias more than objective wrongdoing. Inside the palace, the atmosphere grew increasingly divided. Courtiers found themselves walking on eggshells. Staff were reassigned, schedules rearranged. Events that once included both families were now split, with palace organizers scrambling to avoid any possibility of overlap. Even Christmas planning at Sandringham became a delicate negotiation. Would Camilla attend the family lunch? Would William bring the children? And if both happened, how would they be kept apart? King Charles, caught in the middle, was reportedly devastated. For a man who spent years waiting to be king, who had always hoped to unite his family under a common legacy, this new rift represented a profound personal failure. Charles, always deferential to tradition and harmony, struggled to understand how matters had deteriorated so quickly. He met privately with William on at least 2 occasions following the incident, urging his son to reconsider. But those meetings ended without resolution. William, sources say, did not waver. One palace insider close to Charles confided, he knows he can't force William's hand. The boy is a man now. And more than that, he's the future king. Charles can advise, he can plead, but he can't overrule. William isn't just acting as a father. He's acting as the head of the next generation of royals. For Camilla, the silence from Kensington Palace was particularly difficult to endure. In royal life, silence is a message in itself. No gesture of reconciliation was extended. No invitation to clear the air. And though she continued to fulfill her public duties with grace, those close to her say she became increasingly withdrawn in private. The queen consort's inner circle reportedly began raising concerns about her emotional state. Though she was not in crisis, the cumulative weight of decades of public scrutiny, now intensified by private rejection, was beginning to wear her down. She questioned her position. She questioned whether her past, once supposedly forgiven, was still being held against her. And she questioned whether the future monarchy had any room left for her at all. That question, whether Queen Camilla still fits into the vision of the monarchy Prince William is crafting, has become central to the unfolding drama. While King Charles remains on the throne, his health and age are reminders that succession is not a distant eventuality. And William, in his calculated assertiveness, is already shaping the institution according to his values. One longtime royal historian noted, "We are witnessing a generational pivot." William is drawing a clear line between what was tolerated in the past and what won't be going forward. Camilla represents an era of compromise, of hidden affairs and institutional blindness. William represents something newer, more principled, even if it's more confrontational. Public response to the fracture has been mixed. Some sympathize with Camilla, viewing William's move as unnecessarily harsh. Others applaud his clarity and defense of his daughter. The real intrigue, however, lies in what this means for the future. Already, whispers have emerged about whether Camilla's role might gradually be diminished. Not officially removed, such a move would cause public uproar, but phased out through strategic exclusions and carefully managed optics. Fewer appearances beside William. Less involvement in events concerning the younger royals. more emphasis on her individual charity work and less on her role within the tight core of the royal family. For now, Camilla remains queen consort in title. She remains at King Charles's side. But emotionally and symbolically, she has been pushed to the edges of the monarchy's inner sanctum. And she knows it. As the royal family moves forward, this conflict between tradition and evolution, between personal pain and public duty, between the sins of the past and the ideals of the future, will continue to simmer just beneath the surface. The question is no longer whether reconciliation is possible, it is whether either side even wants it anymore. Inside the high walls of Buckingham Palace, where appearances have always mattered more than emotions, the fallout from Prince William's decision was not limited to just his immediate circle. The reverberations spread rapidly through the institution, causing deep tremors among other senior royals. What had begun as a family matter, a private decision between his son, his stepmother, and his children, quickly evolved into a defining moment for the monarchy itself. Princess Anne was one of the first to take notice, and those closest to her observed a telling shift in demeanor. Though Anne rarely involved herself in palace politics, preferring to maintain a no-nonsense approach to royal duty, she was reportedly unnerved by the open rift. She, perhaps more than any other royal, understood the value of unity and discretion. Yet here was William, future king, public favorite, taking a hard stance that upended the carefully curated image of internal harmony, and didn't express her concerns publicly. That would have been unthinkable. But those in her orbit said she began making subtle gestures, choosing to stand closer to Camilla during events, offering supportive remarks in private gatherings, and dispatching a message to William through unofficial channels urging him to reflect on the broader implications of his decision. Her concern wasn't about loyalty to Camilla necessarily, and had maintained a complex relationship with her brother's wife, one marked more by professional tolerance than personal affection. What troubled her was the precedent being set. The idea that royal grievances could now be aired through visible separation rather than smoothed over behind closed doors was foreign to her upbringing. She feared that such moves would only embolden the media and invite a fresh cycle of intrusive speculation. Prince Edward, the Earl of Wessex, maintained a more measured response. Always more reserved than his siblings, Edward preferred to watch from the sidelines. But even he could not ignore the shifting dynamics. His wife, Sophie, who had formed a warm relationship with Kate Middleton over the years, was reportedly deeply affected by the move. She confided to friends that while she sympathized with William's motives, she worried about the long-term damage being inflicted on the royal brand. Behind the scenes, palace advisors scrambled to contain the situation. The Lord Chamberlain's office, responsible for overseeing royal protocol, held a series of urgent meetings to rework upcoming event schedules. The priority was clear: avoid public appearances that could risk awkward photo ops or hint at internal division. Already, plans for a spring charity gala were being revised. Originally intended to showcase the unity of the royal family in support of youth mental health, it had included a segment featuring both Queen Camilla and the Prince and Princess of Wales. That idea was quickly scrapped. Instead, separate appearances were proposed, with subtle changes in timing and location ensuring they would not cross paths. The royal communications team, too, entered damage control mode. Without releasing an official statement, they began planting positive stories across friendly press outlets. Articles emphasizing royal duty, shared heritage, and the late Queen Elizabeth's legacy began appearing in The Telegraph, The Times, and other traditionally supportive publications. But the media was not so easily managed. Once journalists caught wind of the internal freeze between William and Camilla, speculation surged. The British tabloids, ever hungry for scandal, splashed dramatic headlines across their front pages. Royal rift deepens, read one. Camilla frozen out by William, claimed another. Social media followed suit, with hashtags such as #RoyalDivide and #ProtectTheHeir trending across platforms for days. Public opinion began to polarize. Some commentators saw William as a principled father, putting his children's well-being above royal protocol. Others viewed his decision as cold and vindictive, a targeted slight against a woman who had, despite a complicated past, served the monarchy faithfully since marrying Charles. In private, the Queen's former courtiers, those who had once served Elizabeth II, were said to be dismayed. These were individuals who had spent decades nurturing the royal brand as an unshakable institution, one built on unity and continuity. Watching the House of Windsor air its fractures, even in implied gestures, went against every instinct they had been trained with. "It's not just about Camilla," one former private secretary said. "It's about what the monarchy represents. If the heir can be seen rejecting the queen consort, what does that say to the country about stability, about forgiveness, about growth?" Meanwhile, tensions were growing behind palace gates. Staff members, who often served multiple royal households, now found themselves in awkward positions, uncertain about loyalties, unsure how to navigate overlapping schedules or cross-family communications. Longtime aides who once coordinated seamlessly between Clarence House and Kensington Palace were now instructed to route messages through intermediaries or entirely separate chains of command. This splintering was not just symbolic, it was operational. Where once there had been cooperation, now there was hesitation. Even routine tasks, like coordinating birthday messages or holiday greetings, became fraught with layers of political calculation. One particularly telling moment came during preparations for Princess Charlotte's upcoming school recital. In previous years, it had been customary for both sets of grandparents, Kate's parents, Michael and Carol Middleton, and King Charles and Camilla, to be quietly invited. This year, the invitation list was carefully curated by the Kensington Palace team. While Charles received an invite, Camilla did not. Though the event was private and no photographs were released, word quickly spread among the palace staff. It was a clear indication that William's decision was not limited to palace protocol. It was extending into personal, even mundane, family affairs. Camilla, for her part, remained outwardly composed. She continued to perform her royal duties, attending public events, visiting charities, and participating in state functions alongside King Charles. But those closest to her noted a distinct change in tone. She was quieter, less animated. Once known for her easy banter and gentle laughter during engagements, she now moved with a kind of mechanical poise. A senior aide close to her admitted, "She feels erased." Not publicly, of course. Her title remains, her duties remain. But in the places that matter, the personal places, she's no longer welcome. What made matters worse was the silence from Charles. Though he supported her privately, he made no public overtures to defend or reinforce her place within the family. Some insiders believe he feared exacerbating the situation. Others speculate he agreed with William's protective stance, even if he didn't support the method. Whatever the case, Camilla was left to navigate a growing chasm without clear support from either side. Even more unsettling for palace watchers was the question of precedent. If William could assert this level of control over family access and interaction now, what might he do as king? Would he continue to reshape the monarchy through a lens of personal morality? Would other royals find their roles diminished or recast under a new regime focused on boundaries and reputational control? One royal historian observed, "This isn't just about generational change, it's about ideological shift." William is drawing lines in the sand. And once you do that, reconciliation becomes incredibly difficult. Because it's no longer just about compromise, it's about identity. The Archbishop of Canterbury, whose role often includes quiet mediation within the royal family, was reportedly approached to provide counsel. While there's no public confirmation, insiders say he advised discretion and healing, urging both sides to remember the spiritual and national symbolism of their roles. But with no sign of thawing between the factions, the royal household entered a period of subtle but undeniable transformation. Behind the glittering facade of pageantry and tradition, old bonds were breaking, and new, unspoken rules were taking hold. In the weeks following Prince William's decision to sever royal ties with Queen Camilla's family, the atmosphere beyond palace walls began to shift dramatically. While the royal household maintained its carefully calibrated silence, the public at large was anything but quiet. Across the United Kingdom, and indeed the globe, debates ignited that pierced through café conversations, filled the airwaves of radio call-in shows, and dominated the front pages of newspapers and magazines. Suddenly, Buckingham Palace was no longer the sole stage for the monarchy's drama. Every kitchen table and online forum became a theater of its own. It started with a single, grainy photograph. A picture emerged of Prince William attending a local charity event in Manchester, flanked by Kate Middleton and their 3 children. Absent from the scene were any senior royals outside of the immediate family. While royal events are often highly coordinated, this image carried the weight of unspoken meaning. Observers saw in it not just a smiling family, but a message: this is the future, and it is selective. Commentators quickly took sides. Longtime royal correspondents debated the implications of William's move on morning television shows like Good Morning Britain and BBC Breakfast. Piers Morgan delivered a particularly fiery monologue on his talk show, calling William's choice a calculated assertion of moral authority and lauding him for standing up for his children and refusing to indulge in public fakery. The Church of England, ever careful in its public statements, issued no direct commentary, but several prominent bishops privately voiced concern during synods and informal gatherings. One, speaking on condition of anonymity, said, "While we understand the personal motivations, the monarchy is more than family. It is sacrament, symbol, and national continuity. When these private dramas go public, they chip away at the sanctity." Royal biographers scrambled to adjust upcoming manuscripts. Some authors delayed book releases to include fresh chapters about the growing schism. One biographer, known for an intimate portrait of Charles and Camilla's early years, announced a new work titled Fractured Crown, The Making of a Modern Monarch. Rumors suggested the book would explore the psychological underpinnings of William's decision, drawing from sources who had observed his growing discomfort with Camilla's influence over palace matters. Amid this public storm, Queen Camilla herself remained remarkably composed. She continued to fulfill her public engagements, attending charity galas, visiting hospitals, and even giving a brief speech at a literary awards ceremony. Her tone was cheerful, but observers noticed her body language, more reserved, more rehearsed, less spontaneous than in months prior. There was one particular moment, though, that caught attention. At a veterans event in York, Camilla was introduced to a young girl who handed her a hand-drawn picture of the royal family. The girl, having clearly referenced online images, included William, Kate, George, Charlotte, and Louis, but no Queen Camilla. A bystander said Camilla's smile faltered for the briefest moment. She thanked the child warmly, but those watching closely saw the strain beneath her eyes. That image, though not captured by cameras, was recounted in several eyewitness social media posts. It quickly became a poignant symbol of her new reality. Present in duty, yet absent in perception. Meanwhile, Prince William and Kate tightened their public circle. Invitations to their public events became more exclusive, and their communications team made it clear that questions about Queen Camilla or her relatives would not be entertained during press briefings. It was a media strategy reminiscent of Diana's later years, guarded, cautious, and fiercely protective. Kate, while maintaining her gracious public persona, reportedly supported her husband's decision wholeheartedly. Sources close to Kensington Palace described long conversations between the couple, often late at night, where they weighed the consequences of distancing themselves from Camilla's family. In those talks, Kate is said to have spoken at length about shielding their children from potential confusion or emotional conflict. She wanted clarity, said one insider. She didn't want them to have to navigate a web of relationships that came with emotional baggage or unresolved pain. And so, while the media storm raged, the Prince and Princess of Wales remained a united front, steady, silent, and unflinching. Back in the public sphere, a deeper conversation was taking place. Beyond the headlines, beyond the hashtags, citizens began asking more fundamental questions. What is the monarchy's purpose in the 21st century? Can a royal family function like a modern family, with boundaries and emotional nuance? Or does it require the complete suppression of personal will in service of symbolism? For some, William's decision was a step toward modernization, a necessary evolution in an era where mental health, family dynamics, and authenticity matter more than pageantry. For others, it was a dangerous break from the emotional discipline and unified front that had held the monarchy together through wars, abdications, divorces, and scandals. And as the weeks turned into months, one truth became undeniable. Prince William's move had done more than draw a line in the sand. It had redrawn the emotional map of the royal family, altering not just how they were seen, but how they saw themselves. As the decision by Prince William to formally distance his family from Queen Camilla's relatives continued to dominate headlines and conversations across the globe, the ripple effects inside the royal family itself were far more seismic than the public could yet comprehend. Behind the carefully maintained facade of unity, the House of Windsor found itself at the epicenter of a silent crisis. For decades, the royal family had weathered its scandals with a combination of stoicism and rigid adherence to protocol. But this time, something felt different. This wasn't a leaked photo, an indiscretion, or an unauthorized biography. This was a deliberate and public rupture initiated not by a disgruntled outsider or estranged royal, but by the future king himself. And that shook the very core of the institution. The immediate atmosphere inside Buckingham Palace was described by insiders as tense and subdued. Staff members, usually disciplined in their discretion, whispered cautiously in corridors and avoided eye contact with senior courtiers. Meetings were shorter. Moods were clipped. Even the routine clatter of silverware in the palace kitchens was reported to be quieter than usual. King Charles, despite years of personal evolution and relative emotional openness, was deeply unsettled by the development. Sources close to the monarch revealed that he was caught between two emotional poles: paternal understanding for his eldest son's protective instincts and a profound sense of betrayal at what he perceived as a rejection of the woman he had fought for decades to legitimize in the eyes of both the public and the crown. He reportedly spent long hours alone in the Clarence House library, flipping through old letters and documents, including correspondences between himself and Diana during the more peaceful moments of their marriage. Friends say he felt as though he was watching history repeat itself, only this time it was his son drawing lines, not the press or politicians. And unlike the public attacks he had grown used to during his earlier years, this was a personal rebuke from within his own bloodline. Privately, Charles confided in a few of his most trusted advisors that he feared William's move might trigger a precedent. If the future of the monarchy began picking and choosing which relatives were acceptable, then the carefully orchestrated image of unity, tradition, and stability would fracture completely. He knew that the monarchy's strength had always rested in its ability to absorb blows and present a united front, even when the personal cost was high. But even within his inner circle, Charles found diverging views. Some senior advisors argued that William's approach, while disruptive, was also a necessary evolution. They reminded the king that the world had changed. The public now demanded transparency, humanity, and emotional intelligence. A monarchy that failed to adapt would inevitably become irrelevant. Others, however, saw William's move as dangerously individualistic, suggesting it undermined the foundational ethos of duty over desire. One seasoned courtier reportedly said, "We don't get to choose our family. That's not how this works." If every royal started severing ties over emotional discomfort, there would be no one left to wave from the balcony. And then there was Queen Camilla herself. Her reaction, though not visible in public, was reportedly one of heartbreak followed by quiet resilience. According to palace insiders, Camilla received the news of William's distancing move during a scheduled briefing on an upcoming charity event. She had been reviewing guest lists when one of her private secretaries gently relayed the news that the Prince of Wales had made it known that Camilla's children and extended family would no longer be invited to royal functions involving his own family. At first, Camilla said nothing. She sat quietly, her eyes fixed on the list in front of her. Then she nodded slowly, dismissed the staff, and remained alone in the room for nearly an hour. What happened during those 60 minutes remains known only to her. But by the time she emerged, she was composed, dignified, and businesslike. Traits that had become her armor in the years since she entered royal life under the most unforgiving spotlight. But friends of Camilla described her as deeply wounded. She had spent years slowly rehabilitating her public image, winning over a skeptical public with her work on domestic abuse awareness, literacy, and healthcare causes. She had endured the whispers, the tabloid mockery, the persistent comparisons to Diana. And now, just as she had settled into her role as queen consort, she was facing a new rejection from a stepson she had tried, however imperfectly, to support. More painful still was the effect on her children, Tom Parker Bowles and Laura Lopez. Though they had always maintained a low profile and avoided seeking royal roles or privileges, they had quietly become a part of the royal landscape. Laura's children were even close playmates of Prince George and Princess Charlotte at one point, enjoying occasional visits to Balmoral and Sandringham. Now, those bonds were being cut without explanation or ceremony. Sources close to Laura said she was blindsided and devastated by the decision, not because of a desire for title or influence, but because of the personal toll. She had worked hard to foster respectful relationships within the royal circle, and the sudden distancing felt like an erasure of years of effort and goodwill. Tom Parker Bowles, always the more outspoken sibling, reportedly reacted with a mixture of fury and sadness. In private conversations, he questioned whether Diana's legacy had cast a permanent shadow over his mother's acceptance, even after all these years. "We'll never be good enough, no matter what we do," he allegedly told a friend. The Queen's grandchildren, though young, also sensed the shift. At one family event, Laura's daughter was overheard asking why she wouldn't be seeing Aunt Kate's children anymore. The adults had no answer. Inside Kensington Palace, meanwhile, William and Kate stood firm. While they avoided public comment, Their resolve was evident in their actions. Event invitations were carefully curated. Press statements were meticulously worded. The tone was clear. This was a family protecting its own nucleus, even at the cost of public discomfort. Princess, and ever the pragmatist, kept her thoughts largely to herself. But palace aides noticed that she spent more time than usual in conversation with her brother Charles in the weeks that followed William's announcement. It was said that she offered him both emotional support and strategic counsel, reminding him that each generation must find its own balance between duty and identity. Prince Edward and Sophie, by contrast, were notably absent from public commentary and engagement on the matter. Some speculated that they were attempting to preserve neutrality, while others believed they were quietly sympathetic to William's stance. Their own children had experienced the complicated balance of being royal and yet not royal enough, a situation not unlike what Camilla's grandchildren were now facing. Within palace corridors, the phrase "the line of the future" began to circulate, an informal term among staff referring to William, Kate, and their children. While the royal household remained officially united, there was an unspoken understanding that a new power center was emerging, one less tethered to the past and increasingly defining its own moral and emotional parameters. Even the Queen's personal staff underwent subtle changes. Some long-serving aides who had been close to Charles and Camilla found themselves reassigned, or their roles quietly diminished. In their place, newer advisors, many with backgrounds in modern media, public relations, and social strategy, began to influence how the monarchy presented itself. The future, it seemed, was being restructured from within. At Windsor Castle, the mood was reflective. The royal chapel services, usually serene, took on a somber air. Sermons subtly shifted focus, emphasizing themes of reconciliation, family, and the burden of legacy. Palace chaplains offered spiritual counsel to those who sought it, including Camilla, who was said to be attending services more frequently and spending extended periods in private prayer. Even the royal dogs, it was said, sensed the tension. Camilla's Jack Russell Terriers, Beth and Bluebell, were seen restlessly pacing near her chambers more often, their usual calm disturbed by the unease that permeated the halls. And so, while the world continued to debate the public implications of Prince William's choice, inside the monarchy, the fallout was far more intimate. It was a season of silent reckonings, unspoken disappointments, and delicate recalibrations of loyalty and love. In choosing to protect his children from what he perceived as emotional complexity and unresolved pain, Prince William had drawn a line that others now had to navigate. Some stepped forward with understanding. Others stood back with sadness. And a few, like Queen Camilla, bore the weight of the decision with quiet dignity, knowing that in the royal family, love and duty rarely walk hand in hand. In the days following Prince William's announcement that Queen Camilla's relatives would no longer be included in royal family functions involving his children and immediate household, media coverage exploded into a frenzy not seen since the days following Harry and Meghan's exit. This wasn't simply a palace squabble. The world quickly realized this was a generational rupture unfolding in real time. The headlines came fast and hard. "William draws the line," screamed one front page, while another tabloid chose the starker, "Camilla's family shunned." Across British breakfast tables, cafe counters, and television screens, everyone had a take. Morning talk shows turned into heated roundtables, with former palace insiders, royal biographers, political commentators, and emotional callers weighing in. In the United Kingdom, the response was deeply divided. Among more traditionalist royal watchers, those who had come to accept and even admire Camilla over the years, there was a sense of betrayal. Many believed that Queen Camilla, despite her controversial history, had more than earned her place beside King Charles through decades of quiet service and loyalty. These voices argued that punishing her family, especially her children and grandchildren, felt cruel and unnecessary. Letters to the editor flooded in across major British newspapers, with one retired teacher from Surrey writing, "I'm no monarchist, but even I can see this is a woman who has stood by Charles through thick and thin. Her children never courted the spotlight. To cast them out now is not just petty, it's unkind." But another growing faction, particularly younger Britons, saw things differently. To them, William's move signaled a refreshing shift toward modern family dynamics, where boundaries, emotional health, and personal autonomy mattered more than archaic duty. Social media exploded with posts praising the prince for protecting his children from toxic legacies and finally standing up to the ghosts of the past. This generational divide became even more apparent as memes, TikToks, and Instagram Reels dissected Camilla's long-standing role in the collapse of Charles and Diana's marriage. Footage of Diana's old interviews resurfaced, particularly her haunting quote, "There were 3 of us in this marriage," which quickly trended on X and was viewed millions of times in less than 24 hours. The resurgence of Diana's image reignited long-standing wounds. Royal historians were quick to remind the public that many had never forgiven Camilla, even as official narratives had sought to rehabilitate her public image. Now, with William's action, it seemed a tacit acknowledgement that some scars had never fully healed, at least not within his generation. Internationally, the response mirrored the UK's bifurcation. In the United States, where Prince Harry and Meghan Markle still occupied the attention of a dedicated and polarized fan base, the news was interpreted through various lenses. On one hand, conservative royal commentators praised William for upholding the dignity and moral authority of the crown. On the other, liberal-leaning outlets contrasted his act with what they viewed as his previous complicity in ostracizing Meghan and Harry. Some commentators questioned why it was acceptable for William to establish boundaries now, yet not when Harry did the same. Cable news networks brought on a carousel of analysts to unpack every angle. Was this an internal power grab between royal generations? Was it a delayed response to Camilla's increasing influence? Or was William simply charting his own course for a streamlined monarchy, free of past entanglements? In Paris, Berlin, and even Sydney, editorial pages weighed in, often with more curiosity than outrage. To the outside world, the British royal family had long been a soap opera cloaked in pageantry. But what made this latest development more compelling was that it didn't involve affairs or scandal. It involved principles. In the middle of the media storm stood Queen Camilla, noticeably absent from public engagements during the week following William's announcement. Buckingham Palace provided only a short, carefully worded statement, noting that Her Majesty the Queen remains committed to her charitable endeavors and supports the King fully. The phrase "supports the King" did not go unnoticed. It subtly positioned Camilla not as a combative force but as a dutiful partner, reinforcing the idea that she was not interested in escalating the drama. Behind the scenes, however, public relations firms affiliated with the royal family moved into high gear. Camilla's image, so painstakingly rebuilt over the last 20 years, was under threat. Crisis managers quietly reached out to friendly journalists, subtly shaping stories that reminded the public of Camilla's work with literacy programs, her advocacy for domestic abuse survivors, and her calm steadiness throughout Charles's health scare earlier that year. Simultaneously, news began leaking, strategically or otherwise, about how deeply William's decision had hurt not just Camilla, but King Charles himself. Reporters with long-standing palace connections began to publish pieces about the king's struggle to balance his love for both his wife and his son, painting him as a monarch stuck in the middle of a painful family divide. The messaging was clear. This was a moment for empathy, not condemnation. Yet the public wasn't done talking. Politicians, too, began weighing in, though carefully. While it was unthinkable for sitting MPs to criticize the future king directly, several offered veiled commentary about the importance of family unity in public life. A Labour MP from Manchester said during a radio interview, "At a time when the nation is fractured in so many ways, what we look for in our institutions is solidarity, not division." Though he never mentioned William, listeners knew what he meant. Others, including Scottish nationalists and Irish commentators, took the moment to question the monarchy itself. If even the royals can't maintain family unity, one columnist wrote, why do we continue to pretend they represent moral leadership? In cultural spaces, the conversation took on even more symbolic weight. Think pieces proliferated, exploring what William's decision meant about fatherhood, male vulnerability, intergenerational trauma, and the long shadows cast by public grief. Psychologists were brought onto talk shows to dissect William's motivations, with some suggesting that his actions stemmed from unresolved childhood pain tied to his mother's death and the role Camilla had played in that saga. Celebrities chimed in, too. Some did so subtly, liking or sharing posts that praised William's courage, while others were more direct. An acclaimed actress and known Diana supporter tweeted, "Sometimes healing means cutting ties, even when it's hard." That post alone generated over 500,000 likes. Across British high streets, souvenir shops hesitated. Merchandising teams began to question whether Camilla-themed products would continue to sell, especially with rumors swirling that William would be quietly removing her image from future royal Christmas cards featuring his family. Publishers working on coffee table books about the royal family paused projects mid-production, unsure of which narrative would now define the monarchy's future. At the heart of it all was the growing realization that this wasn't just about invitations to palace events. This was about symbolism. Prince William had drawn a clear, almost clinical boundary between the royal lineage and what he viewed as peripheral. That act, done without drama or fanfare, sent a message louder than any televised interview or tabloid leak could. He wasn't burning down the institution. He was redefining it. And whether people loved or hated his choice, they couldn't deny its resonance. For many, the story had now transcended palace walls. It had become a mirror reflecting their own familial fractures, loyalties, and moral calculations. Was it ever right to cast out people who had hurt you, even if they had changed? Could new bonds be formed without fully reckoning with the past? And when the cost of emotional health was public perception, who ultimately paid the price? As public conversation continued to intensify, Buckingham Palace remained mostly silent. But in truth, they were watching the storm closely. Every headline, every social media trend, every public poll was being tracked. For an institution that thrived on stability, this latest upheaval revealed a sobering truth. The future was arriving faster than they had planned, and it was being written not in royal proclamations, but in the decisions of a prince determined to do things differently. Behind the gilded gates of Buckingham Palace, where silence often speaks louder than words, the emotional temperature had risen to an uncomfortable boil. Despite the carefully constructed public facade that insisted everything was under control, the private reactions within the royal household were anything but composed. The corridors once filled with quiet reverence now echoed with hushed voices, clipped footsteps, and a palpable sense of unease. Queen Camilla, never known for public outbursts or overt displays of emotion, reportedly retreated almost entirely from her usual routine in the days following William's announcement. She canceled 2 appearances citing private obligations, but insiders suggested a different truth. Camilla had been deeply wounded, not only by the decision itself, but by the cold efficiency with which it was carried out. There had been no warning, no family conference, no attempt at dialogue. One day her family was part of royal holiday traditions. The next, they were excised, erased, as if they had never mattered. Palace staff who had served both Charles and Camilla for years began to notice subtle shifts. Camilla no longer lingered in the morning salons, where she typically reviewed newspapers over Earl Grey tea. Her cheery conversations with florists and catering staff dwindled into brief nods. Her eyes, normally guarded but friendly, carried the weary weight of someone who felt both betrayed and powerless. According to one source close to the Queen Consort, what hurt most was not just the exclusion of her family, but the implication that they were unworthy. She had spent decades enduring scorn from the public and press, rebuilding her life in the shadow of Diana's legacy. The quiet, dignified distance her children maintained from royal politics had always been a source of pride for her. They hadn't chased fame or titles. They had stayed private, choosing quiet lives far from the cameras. Yet now, they were being punished for sins they never committed, judged by the lingering sin of scandal from a different era. King Charles, caught squarely between the woman he loved and the son he had raised to someday wear the crown, was left grappling with a conundrum that no sovereign training could have prepared him for. Charles had always understood that his reign would be shaped by compromise, between tradition and reform, duty and emotion, past and future. But he had not anticipated this kind of personal heartbreak at a time when his health was also quietly becoming more fragile. Sources inside Clarence House revealed that Charles had tried, in his own reserved way, to reach out to William following the announcement. A series of messages were exchanged through private couriers, followed by a phone call that reportedly lasted less than 15 minutes and ended with more silence than resolution. William, ever poised and restrained in public, had made his stance clear in private. The decision was final. He would not subject his children to complex family dynamics rooted in a painful past. He loved his father, but he would not compromise on this. To Charles, this felt like a slap. He knew William had long struggled with feelings of abandonment and betrayal surrounding Diana's death and Camilla's role in that narrative. But he had hoped that the years, and Camilla's consistent support of the royal institution, had softened those edges. Clearly, he had misjudged the depth of those lingering wounds. The king confided in a select few senior courtiers, men and women who had stood beside him during the turbulent divorce, Diana's tragic death and the years of rebuilding. These advisors, while sympathetic, were also realists. They knew that public sentiment was shifting rapidly. If William believed that asserting boundaries around his nuclear family strengthened the monarchy's long-term health, then resisting him outright might backfire spectacularly. Charles was reminded, not so subtly, that his son's popularity had surpassed his own. Any move to challenge William publicly would be seen as out of touch at best and authoritarian at worst. And so, King Charles remained publicly neutral but emotionally adrift. He resumed public duties, smiled during engagements, shook hands with foreign dignitaries, but his private conversations grew shorter, more distracted. Aides noted his increasing tendency to pause mid-thought, as though mentally circling a problem for which he had no solution. Within the royal family itself, fissures were forming in once reliable foundations. Princess Anne, known for her blunt practicality, reportedly sided with William. According to whispers among palace aides, Anne had long believed the monarchy needed to shed its unnecessary weight, both in ceremony and in personnel. To her, the decision wasn't cruel, it was strategic. And besides, Anne had always been fiercely loyal to Diana's memory. She admired Camilla's quiet resolve but had never fully accepted her role as queen. Prince Edward and Sophie Wessex, on the other hand, were more cautious. Their public neutrality masked private concerns. Sophie, in particular, had formed a comfortable friendship with Camilla over the years, bonding over shared charity work and a mutual distaste for scandal. She was said to be heartbroken by the rift but wary of being seen taking sides. As the royal family splintered along lines of loyalty and generational outlook, the palace's internal staff struggled to keep order. Scheduling meetings, joint appearances, and even holiday plans became fraught with complications. The idea